Thanks so much for your company. I am Pious Kojo Backah. To our very first story, inflation for the month of March 2023 falls sharply to 45%. Well, this was influenced by some deflation recorded by food and non-alcoholic beverages. Professor Samuel Kobnenim is the government statistician.
Month of March 2023 stood at 45.0% for March 2023. This indicates a 7.8 percentage point drop relative to the rate that was recorded in the month of February 2023. In February 2023, we recorded a rate of 52.8, and in January 2023, 53.6. So we are seeing a sharper decline in the rate of inflation between February 2023 and March 2023, with a 7.8 percentage point drop between these two time periods. From a regional perspective, we identified the Western North recording the highest rate of inflation of 67.3%, and the Volta region recording the least rate of inflation of 25.6%. Disaggregating the national rate of inflation from a food and non-food perspective, we recorded food inflation 50.8% and non-food inflation 40.6%, indicating a 10.2 percentage point difference between food and non-food inflation. Food inflation saw a much sharper drop as it recorded 59.1% for the month of February 2023, indicating an 8.3 percentage point difference from a food inflation perspective and a 7.3 percentage point difference from a non-food perspective. So the slow rate of inflation that we are seeing is largely driven by the sharper drop from a food perspective relative to a non-food perspective. From a locally produced item and an imported item perspective, we saw locally produced items recording an inflation rate of 41.9% and inflation on imported items 51.6%, indicating a 9.7 percentage point difference between locally produced items and imported items.
And it is important that we expand this discussion further. Joining me via Zoom is research lead at GCB Capital, Courage Buti, for his perspective on this latest trend. Grateful, Buti, you could join me on the marketplace. Your initial thoughts on this latest rate? Unmute for me, Courage.
Sorry, good afternoon to you and your listeners. My pleasure having me. Yes, I think I expected that inflation would decline, even if the over 7% margin of decline was a bit of a surprise, because from my simulations, really, the expectation was that we'll begin to see this sharp declines from April, May, thereabout. But it came early, and it's actually a good news at this point in time. You look at the trajectory of inflation and the drivers of that decline, really, and you realize that, I mean, since the start of the year, CD has been volatile in the sense that it's moved up and down, but generally the trend over the last few weeks or so, and particularly for the March inflation window, was one of an appreciation, and that trend is continuing. You've seen also between, I think, February till all the way till the point we are now, fuel prices at the pump have dropped by, I mean, more than 20% over the period. And you would largely see that for the period 2022, the main drivers of inflation have largely been these factors, really. So for their trend now reversing, you will begin to see impact on prices generally on the market. And I'm not surprised that transport inflation in particular declined from 70% in March and in February now to about 52% in March. And you will see that for the first time in about 5 and 8 weeks, petrol and diesel, items that have been top contributors to inflation, have actually dropped out of the top 20 list for contributors to inflation. And so generally, it's a trend that we expect, and it's a trend that could continue. We can see sharper drops in inflation going forward from here.
Interesting. Now, this is coming at a time the IMF has had to, review the economic growth globally, and of course that of Ghana to about a little below 2%. Now, this is coming at a time we are seeing the inflation rate, dropped. Does it come to you as a surprise, and how do we reconcile the two?
Well, yes, growth has been on the downturn. See where policy rate is, 29.5, very high. Until April, the reference rate was 32.7 or so. Yes, it has dropped now to about 25.7 or so percent, really. And you can see cost of credit within the banking system towards private sector, and of course, average cost of credit was approaching the 40%. So really, cost of credit was very tough for businesses, very unfriendly. In the same period, also, the Bank of Ghana would not have the room to support growth the way they would have loved to if inflation allowed. And given government situation also, you would have had to cut back on discretionary spending, most of which go to directly target growth, really. And so it explains why the growth trend is slowing. It is not only for the period 2023, it started from second half 2022, and the leading indicators of economic activity as published by the Bank of Ghana shows that continuous trend of decline in the composite index of economic activity since that time. In fact, it's around 7.6% negative growth as we speak, really. And so it just confirms the general trend of negative or slowing growth that we have seen since half year 2022, and that trend is going to continue, particularly in a period where we are about to begin some front-loaded fiscal consolidation. You expect that governments tighten the fiscal stance a bit. You will not see a lot of discretionary spending going into the 2023 budget if the program eventually starts. The Bank of Ghana is agreeing to a memorandum for zero deficit financing, which means that if you are not able to raise the needed revenue from market, from taxes, and of course from the concessional sources, you may not have the Bank of Ghana backstop, really. So under these circumstances, growth will be challenged. And so I'm not surprised at all that the World Bank or the IMF is actually revising their growth down to about 1.6%. But if we can raise the needed revenues from the tax policies we rolled out this year, if we can actually complete the debt restructuring process, both local and external, and then achieve some interest savings from there, then those savings can actually go into arrears clearance, which will mean money for contractors, and most of them will go back to site. And it could also mean targeted spending in areas that could be growth enhancing. So it's not all lost, but the circumstances of the time means that we are in a slow growth era.
I want to pick your thoughts on these projections the IMF is making in relation to the inflation rates, increasing across board. Let's take a listen, let's take a listen to the IMF speaking on this, and I'll come back to you for your reactions.
According to the fund's April World Economic Outlook report, inflation in Ghana will end the year at 29.4%. However, in 2024, inflation will average 22.2% and end the year at 15%. The report further said global headline inflation has been declining since mid-2022 at a 3-month seasonally adjusted annualized rate. It's added a fall in fuel and energy commodity prices, particularly for the United States, Europe, and Latin America, has contributed to this decline. To dampen demand and reduce underlying core inflation, the fund pointed out that central banks around the world have been raising interest rates since 2021, both at a faster pace and in a more synchronous manner. Inflation stayed above 50% in Ghana in 2022.
All right, so Courage, you've seen the reports there. Now, how do we sustain this growth we are witnessing?
Well, you mean the decline in inflation?
Exactly.
All right, sure. Yeah, so we are in an era now where base effect alone is pulling inflation down, or will pull inflation down in the next few months. We are also in an era where the CD is quite responding to the optimism that IMF deal is imminent. And what we need to do at this point in time, I believe, is to rally on the back of that balance of payment support that is imminent, and then the other internal initiatives that we have long touted but never really got going. Domestic industrialization and reducing our reliance on import and all of that, and effective ways of managing the domestic FX market. Check the activities of the black market people, check activities of people who, the speculators, really, to try to bring some sanity into the regulation of that market. When we do those ones, and then we decisively deal with the whole issue about oil importing and the total import bill, find ways of managing that. Now there is a good for oil policy. How long is it going to last? What is the impact on pricing? If it is something worth entrenching, we have to entrench it and find ways of streamlining that process so that we can achieve its impact on pricing. And most importantly, how do we entrench the gains we stand to get from this IMF program? We've seen in the time past where programs yielded low inflation, yielded higher growth, and a more stable currency outlook, really. But over time, it gets reversed. That monetization of the deficit. Now there is a zero memorandum in place. But what will it be after the program? We need to find ways of decisively entrenching some of these macroprudential policies that would ensure that inflation is predictable going forward. So for the year 2023 and for the period between now till probably end of year, you will see base effect and the currencies dynamics and oil pricing dynamics actually impact inflation. That is what will sustain the trend to around 28% per my personal projections, really. But beyond the program, we need to entrench it, and it will require some decisive policies from the government to do so.
We are grateful, Courage Boti, for your perspective on inflation-related stories. We are indeed grateful, Courage, joining us. Let's stay a while longer on issues that has to do with the economy, because the Paris Club of International Creditors has set up a partial creditor committee to kickstart a restructuring talks with Ghana. My colleague George, you have a report from Washington, D.C.
The creditor committee is being called partial because for now it doesn't include China, which was invited to the meeting as one of the single largest bilateral creditors that Ghana is indebted with more than $1.9 billion. The committee has agreed to start negotiations with Ghana on how the more than $5 billion debt should be handled. That is, whether they will be looking forward to cancelling these debts or review the payment terms, which could end up with the maturity being reviewed. However, China, for now, is not part of the initial deal that was reached in this meeting. This because of concerns as to how the debt owed, which is linked to private firms like the China Exim Bank, should be handled. However, there are indications that China is willing to embark on further engagement and return to the table, possibly participate in this committee in terms of how the debt should be handled. Sources say China has indicated its willingness and pledge that, in principle, it is committed to participating in Ghana's financing program, but one is not sure about the form and structure. Ghana only needs commitment from these bilateral creditors that they are committed to having their debts restructured, or some are describing as financing assurances. And with that, Ghana can go to the IMF board with its program request for possible approval.
George Afi filed that report. Now, let's move on to some other stories. And crude oil prices will slide by 24.1% to an average of $73.1 a barrel in 2023. Well, that's according to the International Monetary Fund's April 2023 World Economic Outlook report. This is from $96.4 it recorded in 2022. Now, the fund also said oil prices will continue to fall in the coming years to $65.4 in 2026. Well, it explained that the uncertainty around this price outlook is elevated in part due to the uncertain rebound in China's growth as well as the energy transition. And my colleague George Yafi, I'm told, is back on Zoom to share what is happening in Washington, D.C. George, grateful you could join me on the marketplace. Now, bring us up to speed on the relevance of this committee set up, the partial committee set up by the Paris Club.
Now, Pious, before anything can be done with respect to restructuring of Ghana, that there's supposed to be, or there must be, a committee established. Now, this committee would actually then open formal negotiations with Ghana in terms of how the over $5 billion debt that Ghana owes the Paris Club can actually be restructured. So some might describe it as very significant because then formal talks can be opened and look at the possibility of restructuring Ghana's debt or possibly cancellation as well. So this is the first step in the several processes that can be done to work out some modalities that will lead to cancellation of Ghana's debt with the Paris Club.
We understand China is not part. Should we be worried?
Well, yes and no, because the reasons that we are picking up for a China decision to stay off for now is that there are still issues about the classification of the debts owed at China. I mean, China argues that some of these debts are owed by private. Ghana is owed to private firms like the China Exim Bank. So it's not a state debt. And so how will these institutions, how will it impact on these institutions with respect to the decision to reclassify or cancel these debts? And the commitment that China gave in that meeting was that, well, they are willing to go back and engage the Exim Bank and then come back again to engage the Paris Club. So we get some indication that, well, for now, they are not, but they're still looking forward to joining this Paris Club.
George, let's talk about the IMF's projection in terms of inflation. Here in Ghana, we've witnessed some 45% of inflation. Really tell us what the IMF has been saying about all of these.
And then earlier on, you highlighted some of them in the report. And the fund itself is optimistic that when you look at some of the measures being taken by the Bank of Ghana, has indeed also contributed to this. But they are still pushing the Bank of Ghana that maybe more hikes might be needed to try and bring the situation under control. Because if Ghana is looking for a program and still these numbers are very, very high, it doesn't send good signals to investors and even these bilateral creditors that you want to engage. And so they are asking Bank of Ghana that they still should be on that path where they will hike the policy rate and try and bring inflation under control. Looking at the almost 30% by end of year, that shows you that significant drop that we might witness this year when it comes to inflation rate.
And we do know that there's been some significant progress in relation to government engaging external creditors. What's the latest on that as well?
So there's more the multilateral framework. One can talk about JICA and also the World Bank and other institutions as well. And in all these meetings, what you pick up is that these institutions are ever willing to help Ghana to come out of the current challenges facing the economy. So you get the signal that they want to help Ghana. So what is government itself doing to bring the situation under control?
What more should we expect for today, George?
Well, the fiscal monetary report is out. Everybody will be looking at what would the fund say about our debt situation, but also government is speeding up further negotiations with the Paris Club. We understand in the coming days, there'll be some engagement with the committee that would then be the formal one, and some of the options will be discussed. So still engagement with these multilateral partners in terms of how they can support the Ghanaian economy.
Thank you very much, George Yafe, joining me on the marketplace. George is reporting live from Washington, D.C., following developments in relation to the IMF World Bank Springs meeting in the USA. Back here in Ghana, Polytank Ghana Limited is poised to give customers access to a strong tanks to aid in the storage of water. There's more in this report. Polytank Ghana Limited has launched its new Somo Super Tank as an addition to its water storage tanks. The tank has UV stabilizers that will aid the tank to withstand all weather conditions. Here is the executive director of the Muhinani Group, Ashok Muhinani, speaking at the unveiling of the new Somo Super Tank.
This is a new technology, and as we explained in the speeches and in the profile, this is a 3-layer which adds extra additives and health preservatives to give you a different dimension to the existing tanks on the market. So it's a different tank completely, it's a different technology, and you've got 3 layers to help with the various features we highlighted. We needed to try and do something innovative, and so we did a lot of research and we came out with this. So it was more innovation. The tanks in the market including ourselves, have been there. And so what else can you do at value add? So this is our value add proposition, which we're launching today.
Chief Director of the Ministry of Sanitation and Water Resources, Noah Tumfo, reiterated government's commitment to closing the gaps and addressing the shortfalls associated with providing Ghanaians with access to clean and safe water. The new Sumo Super Tank provides customers with 9 varieties of colors to choose from. You're still watching The Marketplace with me, Pious Kojo Backah. Now, the Bono East Regional Department of Agriculture has held a mini trade fair in Nkoranza South Municipality with the objective of building business partnerships and market linkages to make agriculture an attractive and profitable venture. And now Sabit has more.
Speaking at the 2023 Regional Business Partnerships and Market Linkages platform organized by the Bono East Regional Department of Agriculture as part of its planned activities to promote agri-businesses within the region, Regional Director of Agriculture, Mrs. Cecilia Keja, underscored the relevance of the forum, which was held under the theme Business Linkages, Promoting Markets and Partnerships in Agriculture.
You know, we launched it about 2 years ago, and we've been passionate about it. And it is business partnership or market linkages. Yes. And what are we talking about? We are talking about the need to quickly sell our foodstuff. Our farmers. Yes. And therefore, this business linkage or business market linkage and business partnership has become very, very, very necessary.
She asserted that the move would, amongst other things, bring together key stakeholders to help assist farmers in their quest to help achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, which aims at reducing poverty.
As a country, we have our SDGs to meet. And as part of the SDG goals, there's the need to reduce poverty. There's also the need for sustainable food availability. We normally say food security. And therefore, at this stage, this time, we have linked people along the value chain. We have our farmers here, we have our aggregators here, we have our people who are involved in big supplies. We have them here, we have marketers here, we have transporters, we have all the people along the value chain available. So the ultimate goal is for us to assist our farmers quickly and immediately sell their produce, and also to be able to meet the SDG goals for poverty reduction and food security.
She also called on investors in need of various food commodities in large quantities to communicate with the Regional Agric Office in order to be linked to the right suppliers scattered across the region.
As you know, we always pride ourselves as the food basket of the nation. And when the information gets to us, we have our various market linkage platforms. We'll have the discussion on such platforms. And people who are in need of large quantities, we don't care the quantity of maize, we don't care about the quantity of rice, beans, whatever. We are ready to supply. We have our FBOs, very vibrant FBOs, who are hardworking and who really can supply the quantities they need.
Some of the participants drawn from the Nkoranza North and South districts had the opportunities to brief officials and the public on their products and services, as well as the various challenges hindering their agricultural trade. Isaac Brobe and his team came up with this cashew machine to help ease the work of cashew farmers across the area.
Machine, a cashew machine, a cashew. We can isi bre ewo cashew titimu cashew no etigu ase a okwosesa aboa no isi di pa betere wan ti osesa aboa no wia na so pack machine di guma atete abo na kese bre no to work.
They lament the high cost of materials in the market and appeal for government's intervention.
Isi ya so hia machine ya se Titikarun kita 170 million on Sanka. Kon materials and holding. Nyasa getwa. Abamba so yasia. Course bit my buffer.
Reporting for JoyNews, Anas Sabit, Nkoranza.
All right, so just before we go, we've got a statement from Goyle basically telling us what really happened in relation to the fuel shortages being witnessed across some outlets in the country. And it reads, GOIL wishes to acknowledge to the public, especially its valued customers, that there have been shortages of its Super XP RO N95 at some of its stations. Now, the shortage, which were experienced during the Easter holidays, were because of operational challenges occasioned by supply disruption. It goes on to say that GOIL has, in the meantime, taken delivery of enough products and has just yesterday taken adequate steps to dispatch over 2 million litres of its fuel to fuel stations experiencing the shortages. Now, over 2 million litres more will be dispatched today. So that's the latest coming in from GOIL, responding to the latest challenge in relation to the shortages of fuel across some outlets in the country. And that's it for the marketplace. I am Pious Kojo Backah. There is always business stories when you log on to myjoyonline.com/business for you and get some to read. We leave you with Money Lab.